You ever get that feeling in your gut like something in your life is a little off, but you can't put your finger on it? That's where this whole story starts. It wasn't some big moment, no dramatic discovery, no text message popping up in the middle of dinner. Just this slow, creeping awareness that something about me and my wife wasn't right. We'd been married 10 years. That's a hell of a long time these days. Most of our friends had split up, or were on their second marriages, but we were still here, still playing house. We had the usual bumps and bruises that come with a decade together: work stress, lazy weekends, those fights you have when you both get too comfortable and forget how to be polite to each other. Nothing out of the ordinary. But this was different. It wasn't her pulling away, or me pulling away, it was both of us, orbiting each other like planets that had gotten too far out of sync. We still did date nights. Still had sex, even if it was more out of habit than heat. But when I looked at her across the table, I felt, what's the word? Distant? Disconnected? Like she was looking at me through a pane of glass. The worst part is, I couldn't even blame her. Because the truth, the one I hadn't admitted to anyone, not even myself, was that I had a secret too. I was cheating on my wife. The first time it happened, it didn't feel like cheating. Not really. It felt like finding a door I didn't know existed in my own house, one that had been locked up so long. The key felt strange in my hand. I could tell you I never saw it coming, that I just tripped into it. But if I'm being honest, the signs were there all along. I just ignored them. And that's how it started, me living two lives under the same roof. A husband, a wife, and the secret that could blow it all apart. Only, my secret wasn't just the usual affair. Because the person I was cheating with? It was my husband. Well, my other husband. The one I never told anyone about. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Alright, so where was I? Right, my husband. My other husband. Now, before your mind starts racing too fast, I should probably back up a bit. See, there's this version of my life that I lived out loud, the one with the white picket fence, the Christmas cards, the backyard BBQs where I wore my world's okayest griller apron and played the part of the doting husband. That life was real. It wasn't fake. I loved my wife. I still do, in a way that's hard to explain now. But there was another version of me. One I had buried so deep I almost forgot he existed. I met him before I met her. We were just kids, really. College roommates, that classic cliché. Only, this wasn't some drunken experiment that got swept under the rug the next morning. This was different. He was different. We used to lie awake, talking about everything: our childhoods, our screw-ups, what scared us, what we wanted out of life. I don't think I ever knew someone the way I knew him. The way I let myself be known. And one night, after way too many beers and even more truths spilled out between us, I kissed him. Or maybe he kissed me. I honestly don't remember who made the first move. All I know is that after that, the lines between friendship and something more blurred so fast it made my head spin. We were together for 2 years. Quietly. Secretly. No one knew. Hell, we barely knew what to call it ourselves. We were best friends, roommates, partners, whatever word felt safest that day. I wasn't ready to call myself gay. He wasn't either. Maybe we weren't. Maybe we were just us. But life, man, life has a way of pushing you into corners. Senior year came and went, and the future got loud. Jobs, family expectations, all the noise that told me what a real man was supposed to do. I let it all drown him out. I broke it off. Told him I couldn't do it. I loved him, but I wanted a wife, kids, the whole 9 yards. And I thought stupidly that would be enough to make me forget. It wasn't. You know how sometimes you think you've locked something away so tight, there's no chance it's ever getting out? That was me with him. I thought I'd packed him up, put him on a shelf, and slammed the door shut. Life moved forward: a job, a wedding, a mortgage. A whole life built brick by brick, and for the most part, I was happy in it. Not fake happy either. My wife was good to me. We made each other laugh. She got my dumb jokes, and I knew exactly how she liked her coffee. We were a team. But even the best teams have cracks, and all it takes is one tiny leak to flood the whole place. The first time I heard from him after all those years, it felt like the floor shifted under my feet. It wasn't some big dramatic message, just a, "Hey, saw something that reminded me of you. Hope you're good." Simple. Clean. And yet I stared at it for a solid hour before I replied. Because all those doors I thought I'd locked? They were rattling. We started slow, like two people circling a bonfire. Catching up, trading stories. He'd moved to another city, bounced around a bit, never settled down. There was something in the way he talked, that familiar mix of sarcasm and softness that used to undo me completely. It was just messages at first. Then calls. I told myself it was harmless. Just two old friends reconnecting, right? Nothing wrong with that. Except I wasn't telling my wife. And I wasn't telling him that every time his name popped up on my screen, my heart did that thing it hadn't done in years, the stupid teenage flip that made me feel alive. It was a month before I saw him. Just a beer, I told myself. One drink. But when I walked into that bar and saw him sitting there, same crooked smile, same worn leather jacket, like no time had passed, I knew I was screwed. I swear to you, I had no intention of crossing that line. When I left the house that night, I told my wife I was meeting an old friend, which wasn't exactly a lie, right? Just not the whole truth. She gave me that distracted, have fun, you give after 10 years of marriage, when your partner's plans barely register because you're too busy folding laundry or scrolling your phone. I told myself it was just going to be a couple beers. Talk about life. Laugh about the stupid stuff we did in college. Keep it clean. But the second I sat down across from him, I knew how badly I'd underestimated the whole thing. There was just something about him, the way he looked at me, like he could still see every piece of me I'd tried to cover up all these years. My wife loved me, but this man, he knew me. The real me. The one I buried when I said, "I do." I don't even remember who leaned in first. Maybe it was him, maybe it was me. All I know is, one second we were laughing, and the next, his hand was on my thigh under the table, like muscle memory. Like no time had passed at all. That touch? It was a crack of lightning straight to the part of me I'd starved for a decade. I felt awake in a way I didn't even know I'd gone numb. I could have stopped it there. I should have. I could have paid the tab, said goodnight, gone home, and kissed my wife like nothing happened. Instead, we ended up in the back seat of his car. The windows fogged up, my hands in his hair, his mouth on my neck, and for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't playing the part of someone else's perfect husband. I was just me. And it felt so good I wanted to cry. I wish I could tell you that night in his car was the only time that I came to my senses, felt the guilt crawling under my skin, and went home to confess everything. But you already know that's not how this story goes. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a door swinging wide open, and once it was open, I couldn't make myself close it again. We started meeting up whenever we could, bars, hotels, even parking lots. I felt like a damn teenager sneaking around my own life. Every time I went home to my wife, I told myself I'd end it. I'd delete his number. I'd stop answering his calls. But I never did. The thing is, and this is where the story starts turning sideways, my wife never seemed to suspect. Not even a little. I mean, you'd think after 10 years she noticed something was off, right? A late night shower, a missed call, some weird excuse about staying at work late, something should have set off alarms. But nothing. If anything, she seemed happier. Like, noticeably happier. She smiled more, touched me more, even suggested a spontaneous weekend away, the kind of thing we hadn't done in years. It didn't make any sense. And then, the twist, the one that knocked the air clean out of my lungs. It was a Friday night. I was supposed to meet him, but he texted last minute saying something came up. So I went home early. Quiet house, lights off. I figured my wife was already asleep. But as I walked past the bedroom, I heard it. Her voice. Soft, low, whispering, but not to me. I stood outside the door, heart pounding, not sure if I was hearing it right. But then she laughed. That laugh, the one I hadn't heard in years, the kind that bubbles up when you're not thinking about how you sound, just completely at ease. And that's when I heard the second voice. His voice. The man I was cheating with, my husband, my secret, was on the other end of that call. Talking to my wife. I stood there like a goddamn statue, every piece of my brain trying to catch up with what my ears were hearing. At first I thought hoped that maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe they'd crossed paths, maybe she was planning some surprise for me and he was helping. My mind bent over backwards trying to make it innocent, but the way she said his name soft, like she'd been saying it for a while, told me all I needed to know. She wasn't talking to him like a stranger. She was talking to him like someone who knew him. Intimately. My stomach knotted so hard I thought I might throw up right there in the hallway. I don't even remember walking into the room. One second I was outside the door, and the next I was standing in the doorway, staring at her, my mouth dry as sandpaper. She gasped, fumbling to hang up the phone like a teenager caught sneaking out, but it was too late. The air between us was thick, heavy with all the words either of us had said for years. And I realized, in that split second, that she hadn't just been talking to him that night. She'd known about him. Maybe not the whole story, but enough. Enough to know there was something between us. Enough to go looking for answers. I was the cheater, yeah, but so was she. The part that knocked me sideways wasn't just that she was cheating. It was who she was cheating with. My wife was having an affair with the same man I was. There's a moment, and I mean a real moment, when your life splits clean in two. There's the life you thought you had, and the life you actually have. That night? That was my moment. My wife sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her phone like it could somehow protect her from what was coming next. I stood there, just breathing shallow, shaky, trying to find a single word that made sense. How long? That's all I could get out. My own voice barely sounded like mine. She didn't even ask what I meant. She knew. 6 months, she said. 6 months. The math hit me like a punch to the chest. 6 months ago was when I first reached out to him. When I opened that door to my own past, I had no clue my wife had already found it from the other side. I was floored. I mean, I'm the one who's supposed to have the secret, right? I was the one slipping off to bars and back seats and cheap hotel rooms. I was the villain in my own head. But her? My wife, the woman who packed my lunch sometimes just because, the one who knew I hated cilantro and always let me pick the movie, she'd been doing the exact same thing. With him. The man I thought was my secret, my shame, my hidden piece of happiness, he was hers too. And that's when the worst part hit me. Did you know about me and him? I asked. She shook her head, her eyes glassy, her fingers twisting the hem of her t-shirt. I had no idea, she whispered. Until now. And that's when the ground fell out from under me completely. We were both cheating. With the same man. In the same house. And none of us knew. The silence that filled that room after she said she didn't know? It was deafening. The kind of silence you can feel pressing on your chest like a weight. Neither of us knew where to start. Hell, how do you even start a conversation like that? I sat down on the floor, right there next to the dresser, because my legs just gave up. My wife, my cheating wife, was sitting on the bed above me, her hands fidgeting in her lap like she was waiting for a verdict. But how do you pass judgment when you're guilty of the exact same crime? The absurdity of it all started to bubble up in my chest, and before I could stop myself, I laughed. Just this broken, breathless laugh that sounded more like a man losing his mind than anything funny. Of all the people, I said, shaking my head. Him. She looked at me, not angry, not defensive, just tired. How did you even meet him? She asked, her voice so soft I almost missed it. College, I said. First love. Her mouth opened a little, but no sound came out. Like she was trying to rearrange the last 10 years of her life into something that made sense with that new piece of the puzzle. How about you? I asked. Where did you meet him? And that's when the twist inside the twist hit me. Online, she said. One of those anonymous advice forums. I was venting about feeling invisible in my marriage, and he replied. We just clicked. I stared at her, my head spinning so fast I thought I might be sick. The man I had been sneaking around with for months had been playing online confidant to my wife. Listening to her complaints. Offering her comfort. Sliding into her life the same way he slid back into mine. The bastard was cheating on both of us with each other. It should have made me furious. It should have made me want to put my fist through the wall. But all I felt was empty. Because the truth is, we hadn't just been cheating on each other. We'd both been searching for something we couldn't find inside our marriage, and somehow, we both found it in the exact same person. We didn't sleep that night. Not together, not apart. We just existed in the same space, circling each other like two people who'd been in a car wreck but were too dazed to check for injuries. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, his name still glowing on the screen from the last text he sent. My wife sat across the room, knees hugged to her chest, her phone clutched in her hand too, like we were both holding a live wire and neither one of us knew how to let go. The next morning, after the world outside our house had the audacity to keep turning like nothing had happened, we both knew we couldn't just leave it there. We need to talk to him, she said. I should have said no. I should have thrown my phone into the nearest lake and told her we were done with him, with secrets, with all of it. But I didn't. Because the truth, the ugly, undeniable truth, was that I didn't want to let him go. Not yet. Maybe not ever. So we called him. Together. I'll never forget the sound of his voice when he answered, all casual and warm, like he had no idea the wrecking ball that was about to hit him. Hey babe, he said, and I still don't know which one of us he thought he was talking to. For a second, nobody spoke. Just three people on the same call, breathing. Then my wife said, We know. Silence. And then, the most unexpected thing happened. He laughed. Not in a cruel way, not some villainous chuckle, but this stunned, almost relieved laugh, like a man who'd been balancing on a tightrope for months and finally fell off. I guess I owe you both an explanation, he said. We didn't yell. We didn't accuse. There was no point. We'd all built this mess together, brick by brick. So we listened. He told us the truth, how it started, how it spiraled, how somehow, completely by accident, he'd ended up in love with two people who just happened to be married to each other. And the wildest part? Neither of us hung up. Because for all the betrayal, all the hurt, there was something else sitting there between the three of us. Curiosity. There's no guidebook for something like this. No self-help podcast called So You and Your Wife Accidentally Fell for the Same Man. We were flying blind, all three of us hurt, confused, a little pissed off, but underneath all that, curious. That first conversation lasted hours. None of us really knew what we were even trying to figure out. Were we ending something? Starting something? Trying to untangle the knot, or just sit in it together? But here's the thing, and I know this sounds crazy, the more we talked, the more something strange happened. We stopped being two people cheated on by the same man, and started being three people who, somehow, were all a little in love with each other. It didn't happen overnight, and it sure as hell wasn't easy. There were fights, tears, some long stretches of silence where none of us were sure what the hell we were doing. But underneath all of it, there was this undeniable truth: none of us wanted to walk away. My wife still loved me, and weirdly, she wasn't as angry as I thought she'd be when she found out about my past with him. Maybe because she'd already found her own version of him. Maybe because she saw how much of me I'd hidden, even from myself. And me? I still loved her too. But I couldn't pretend that what I felt for him was just some nostalgic slip. It was real. It had always been real. And him? He didn't want to choose. So, we stopped making him. It's not like we became some perfectly functional poly fairy tale overnight. There were rules, boundaries, a lot of awkward trial and error. It was messy, complicated, and about as far from the suburban marriage we'd built as you could get. But it was ours. The craziest part? We started being more honest, all of us. The secrets stopped. The half-truths, the sneaking around, the quiet resentment, we laid it all out, ugly and beautiful, and let it breathe. I don't know if we'll make it forever. Hell, I don't even know if we'll make it through the year. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not living two lives. I'm just living one. It turns out, the person I was cheating with wasn't just my husband. It was the part of me I thought I had to bury to be a good husband in the first place. And somehow, my wife found him too. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but damn if it isn't the most honest one I've ever lived.